On June 22, 1941, the world witnessed the beginning of the largest and most brutal military invasion in human history, Operation Barbarossa. Nazi Germany, at the zenith of its power, unleashed an unprecedented force. Over 3 million soldiers, 4,000 tanks, and 2,700 aircraft surged toward the Soviet Union. This colossal campaign aimed to obliterate Bolshevism, enslave millions, and establish a German empire stretching to the Ural Mountains. It was a moment of reckoning that would alter the trajectory of World War II and reshape global history. This was not merely a war of conquest, but a clash of ideologies. At its core, Operation Barbarossa was a racial and ideological war. Fascism, anchored in the belief of Aryan supremacy, sought to annihilate communism, a system Hitler deemed an existential threat propagated by inferior Slavic and Jewish populations. The stakes were monumental, as this campaign would not only dictate the outcome of the Second World War, but also leave an indelible scar on humanity, marked by unprecedented suffering and destruction. In this detailed exploration, we will delve into the origins, planning, execution, and aftermath of Operation Barbarossa. We will uncover the harrowing experiences of soldiers and civilians swept up in its tide, dissect the strategic blunders of Hitler and Stalin, and examine the enduring consequences of this catastrophic campaign. Let us embark on this journey into one of history's darkest chapters. To comprehend the magnitude of Barbarossa, we must first revisit the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939. This shocking non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union stunned the world. Beyond its public assurances of peace, the pact concealed a sinister agenda: the division of Eastern Europe. Germany seized Western Poland, while the Soviet Union annexed the East, along with the Baltic states and parts of Romania. Yet, this alliance was fraught with mutual distrust. For Hitler, Stalin was a temporary ally, a Jewish Bolshevik destined for destruction in his vision of Lebensraum, a German empire stretching eastward. Stalin, on the other hand, viewed the pact as a strategic delay, granting time to modernize the Red Army, which had been crippled by his purges in the 1930s. These purges decimated the officer corps, leaving the Soviet military dangerously weakened and ill-prepared for a major conflict. Hitler's decision to invade was driven by ideology and overconfidence. Germany's swift victories in Poland, France, and the Balkans emboldened him. Convinced that the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay, he believed the Blitzkrieg would shatter it in months. By late 1940, planning for Barbarossa was underway, targeting a spring 1941 launch, with the expectation of a decisive campaign lasting no more than 6 months. Operation Barbarossa took its name from Frederick Barbarossa, a medieval German emperor, symbolizing Hitler's vision of a grand crusade against the East. The plan was as bold as it was perilous. Spanning an 1,800-mile front, the invasion divided German forces into 3 army groups, each tasked with a vital objective. Army Group North to advance through the Baltic states and capture Leningrad, a symbolic and strategic prize. Army Group Center, the largest force, tasked with seizing Moscow, the Soviet Union's political and industrial heart. Army Group South to secure Ukraine, a region vital for its coal, oil, and agricultural resources. German strategists underestimated Soviet manpower, resilience, and industrial capacity. Overlooking logistical challenges, they failed to anticipate the vast distances, poor infrastructure, and harsh climate of Russia. Hitler's ideological zeal compounded these miscalculations. The notorious Commissar order directed German troops to execute Soviet political officers on sight. Following behind the Wehrmacht, Einsatzgruppen mobile killing squads carried out mass executions of Jews, communists, and other undesirables. Barbarossa was not just a military campaign, it was a war of annihilation. In the early hours of June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa commenced with a ferocious barrage. German artillery and aircraft devastated Soviet border defenses, while the Luftwaffe obliterated over 1,200 Soviet planes in a single day. German panzers surged forward, creating breaches that infantry units exploited with astonishing speed. The early successes were staggering. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and obliterated in battles like Minsk and Smolensk. By July, German forces had advanced hundreds of kilometers, capturing over 300,000 Soviet troops. Soldiers on the front lines felt invincible. One German soldier wrote, "The Red Army crumbled before us, Villages burned, and prisoners surrendered in droves. We were certain the war would end by Christmas. The vast expanse of the Soviet Union and the tenacity of its people began to hinder the German advance. Stalin, after initial paralysis, galvanized his nation for a great patriotic war, calling upon every citizen to resist. The Soviet Union's initial reaction to Barbarossa was chaotic, disorganized and outgunned. The Red Army suffered catastrophic losses. Yet, amidst this chaos, resilience emerged. Factories in Western Russia were dismantled and relocated east, beyond German reach, ensuring continued production of weapons and supplies. Millions of men and women were mobilized, turning the war into a total national effort. A scorched earth policy became central to Soviet strategy. Retreating forces burned crops, demolished infrastructure, and evacuated villages to deny resources to the enemy. Behind German lines, Soviet partisans waged a relentless guerrilla war, disrupting supply lines and ambushing isolated units. One partisan recalled, "We survived on scraps, striking where the enemy least expected. Every act of resistance was a blow for our motherland." As summer gave way to autumn, the German advance stalled. Operation Typhoon, the assault on Moscow, encountered fierce resistance bolstered by Siberian reinforcements. Autumn rains turned roads into quagmires, immobilizing German tanks. When winter arrived, the Wehrmacht, unprepared for temperatures as low as 40 degrees, suffered severely. Frostbite, mechanical failures, and dwindling supplies sapped morale. In December 1941, the Red Army launched a massive counteroffensive, driving the Germans back from Moscow's outskirts. This defeat shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. Hitler's dreams of a swift victory were dashed, marking a critical turning point in the war. The human toll of Barbarossa was staggering. Millions of Soviet soldiers were captured, with countless perishing in German POW camps due to starvation, disease, and abuse. Civilians endured mass executions, forced labor, and starvation. Entire villages were obliterated in brutal reprisals. Jewish communities were among the first victims of the Holocaust. Einsatzgruppen massacred over 1 million Jews in 1941 alone. Survivors recalled the horror. "We were marched to the forest. They shot everyone, men, women, children. I fell into the pit and played dead, covered by the bodies of my family." Though Barbarossa failed to achieve its objectives, its consequences reverberated throughout the war. The Eastern Front became a grinding conflict of attrition, consuming resources and lives at an unimaginable scale. For Germany, Barbarossa's failure marked the beginning of its decline. For the Soviet Union, the sacrifices made during this campaign paved the way for later victories at Stalingrad, Kursk, and Berlin. The resilience displayed by the Soviet people became a defining feature of the war. Barbarossa's failure underscored the dangers of hubris and the destructive power of ideology, leaving lessons for future generations.